Hi, everybody. It is Wednesday, August 27th, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pep.
And the Donetsk mug says, I'm here because I love Nima's smile.
I want to start, Pepe, with your latest piece that you've
Thank you.
just published. It's the title is somehow it's amazing. I've just read it just moments ago, and
Thank
you're talking about Trump, the myth maker.
Yes.
you know and it then goes to these forever wars and how they're changing, rewriting geopolitics. What are you trying to make in this article? What are you trying to say to us? What are the main points of your new piece?
Thank you. Thank you, Nima. Yes, it's ambitious in a sense that I'm appealing to, let's say, the audience's best instincts and a little bit of historical memory when they were in school, because I'm attempting a crossover between Greek mythology and realpolitik. I was inspired by my dear friend Alistair Crook. Alistair, in one of his latest at Judge Napolitano, it was absolutely brilliant. It was Alistair that started talking about Trump as a myth maker. And he was drawing parallels between Putin as an Apollonian figure, because he's like Putin is an Apollo. He's cool, calm, collected, calculated, Olympic in a sense. And Trump is a Dionysiac figure, like a Bacchus out of control, of course, but I would say, on a cheaper level. So, what Alistair sketched brilliantly, by the way Trump is always using archetypes to impress his narrative. And if you use Jung, and I'm sure Donald Trump never read Jung in his life, so he probably thinks that Jung is a football player somewhere. But Alistair was using Jung to talk about how powerful political figures can use and manipulate archetypes to prevail. And this is exactly what Trump does, and he's a very good at doing that. But of course, I would say, on a much junkyard, cheap level. So, in the middle of the column, I did not attempt. In fact, I was talking about Trump, the self-image of Trump as a mythical Greek uh, deity, could be Theseus, for instance. And I talk about that because Trump can be seen as a Theseus that is lost in his own labyrinth, or that fighting different minotaurs, mini minotaurs, small minotaurs, minotaurs of his own making, but still he cannot evade the labyrinth. And to a great extent, he created this labyrinth for himself. So we can see Trump as almost a crossover of Narcissus and, let's say, a Theseus that cannot get anything done, but more like Narcissus. And this is in the title, because much more than Dionysius, Trump is more like a Narcissus, absolutely fascinated by his own image and drowning in the pool reflecting his image all the time, and he's drowning serially over and over again. And the pool is actually a swamp. So we can use all these metaphors and these images, which some of them Trump uses themselves, like the swamp. The pool is actually a swamp. So the swamp is pushing Trump to the bottom of the swamp all the time, and and there's nothing he can do to escape it. Even if in his mind he thinks that he's Theseus, and Ariadne gave him the thread, and if he follows the thread, he can escape the labyrinth. So he cannot escape the swamp, he cannot escape his own pool, and he cannot escape the labyrinth in the end. The problem with all that is that we are all hostages of this Trumpian manipulation, which is something that Alistair brilliantly explained in just a few minutes. And I explained it my own way in this article. So, okay, so this is the, you don't see this very often when you talk about geopolitics, but I love to push the boundaries of geopolitical discussion, introducing history, mythology, choreography, pop music, cinema, quotes from literature, and all that makes it much more creative, dynamic, richer, and it's great to provoke your readers into doing these parallels and associations.
Pepe, when it comes to the mindset, as we were talking about Donald Trump, but it seems that the Russian administration, the Putin administration, has achieved their goals, in my opinion, whatever they had in their mind. But the outcome of the meeting and what we are witnessing right now, it's totally positive toward Russians, but it's hugely negative toward what's going on with the Trump administration. I don't see anything positive coming out of the administration in the aftermath of that meeting between the two presidents.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about, because we had Lavrov on MSNBC talking, just simply putting out the facts of what's going on in Ukraine. You don't see that sort of, that sort of clarity in the way that the Trump administration is trying to put out their policy. What's going on in the Trump administration? Do you think, are we gonna see, after all, are they gonna get to the point that, let's be honest, let's say what, I don't know what happened during the meeting, but let's be honest with the American people. They're trying somehow, what it feels is this, they're trying somehow to be closer to Europeans, closer to Russians. You cannot play both sides. It feels like Erdogan is running the United States. How do you feel about that?
Well, Nima, talk about muddy waters. And these muddy waters brings us again to the image of the swamp and of these muddy waters in the pool where Trump is contemplating his own image all the time, fascinated by his own image all the time. You saw what he said yesterday, right? I can do anything I want because I am the president of the United States. So he sees himself, in fact, if we want to push the metaphors up there, he's Jupiter. In fact, he is Jupiter. He strikes like lightning, even though he doesn't have an Oreshnik. In fact, it's Apollo has the Oreshnik, so Apollo can strike like lightning. But in his mind, Trump, he sees himself as Jupiter, the all-powerful king of all the gods, ruling over Olympus and ruling over everything. This brings us to the second part of the column, Nima, because I enter into Realpolitik and what actually was perceived by Trump even before Alaska and then after Alaska. It looks like, in fact, it doesn't look like, we are certain by now, Witkoff did not understand what Putin told him before Alaska. Witkoff interpreted Putin agreed to some of the American ideas as basically ditching the ultimate red line, which is no NATO in Ukraine. This is what Witkoff understood. So, okay, once again, I made a joke that I qualified Witkoff as the real estate Bismarck. And of course, he's not a diplomat. He does deals. He used to do deals with real estate. It's ridiculous. So he doesn't have the finesse of a super diplomatic mind like Bismarck, like Talleyrand. Of course, forget it. So he got it wrong, or maybe it was lost in translation. from Russian to English. And obviously, Trump believed what Witkoff told him. So Trump also interpreted that Putin, so now we are having concessions by the Russians. We can have peacekeepers in Ukraine, which is an euphemism for NATO troops. It can be EU troops, NATO troops, EU, NATO troops, but most of the EU members are NATO members. So in the end, it's NATO troops. And it's not an accident that immediately the headless chihuahuas in Europe start talking non-stop about a peacekeeping force. Some of them said, no, we're not going to send our soldiers. Like the Italians said, no, we're not going to send our soldiers to Ukraine. The Brits, of course, we will. The French, we will. The Germans, we will. But the whole thing was based in a misunderstanding and a lost in translation gambit by Witkoff himself. So Witkoff is responsible for this enormous kabuki now about, we're going to have a peacekeeping force in Ukraine. Everybody knows that this is the mega red line for Russia, because Russia interprets this as NATO troops in Ukraine. So this means forever war, once again. So Trump, obviously, he may have perceived that he was... the trap was set for him, so he started to try to distance himself. We're gonna be in the backup. We're gonna provide the ISR, air cover, maybe air defense, even spy planes, which there are spy planes, American spy planes already doing the back and forth in Ukraine, in the Black Sea, etc. So this is nothing new. But obviously no American boots on the ground. So this is how he sells this to American public opinion. But Europeans, they took it seriously. So the only thing that you see all across Europe now, mainstream media, is the European peacekeeping force in Ukraine, which is, once again, it's NATO without NATO. And obviously the Russians, including Lavrov, have been saying, look, you are definitely lost in space, because we've been saying this since forever. No way, because this means NATO in Ukraine. So once again, the problem of you mentioned if could be some sort of clarity coming from the Trump administration. It's impossible, Nima, because they deal in muddy waters, and even the president muddies the water himself, and the guys who work for him, like Witkoff, even worse. He totally muddied the waters with his incomprehension of what Putin was telling him, even before setting up Alaska. The Russians considered that Alaska was a success because Putin went there. Trump paid attention to Putin face to face. This is very, very important. Apparently, re-registered one or two ideas in his narcissistic mind. But then 5 minutes later, he forgets about it. And once again, why he is so incendiary and volatile, we all know that. He can change his mind in a second. And then he even could start contemplating allowing long-range missiles to go to Kiev, provided by the Europeans, and these missiles, sooner or later, are going to start attacking civilian targets in Moscow or in St. Petersburg. And then we are in deep, deep shit, all of us. Everybody knows that. But obviously for Trump, why not? So that explains why the Russians are being 24/7. They have to be on red alert about everything. How he's going to change his mind, what's going to be the next Gambit, what sort of PR operation he's going to mount. I want a meeting with Putin and Zelensky. Maybe not such a good idea, or maybe I won't go, or maybe they will go and I'll talk. You see, it's muddy waters all over the place. So this is going to be discussed at the SCO table this weekend in Tianjin, and obviously will be discussed by Putin and Xi face to face. Putin is on a 4-day visit to China. This is immensely important, including the SCO in Tianjin, and then the big parade on March 3, oh, sorry, March, I'm sorry, on October 3 in Tiananmen Square, 80 years of the Chinese victory over Nazism, fascism, and Japanese imperial aggression. Enormously important. And Putin and Xi will be together for 4 days. So obviously the strategic partnership will be even more solid after that. And they'll be discussing, okay, how we're going to start to manage, how we're going to manage Trump from now on. Consider that he seems to be totally unhinged. And obviously, most of the time inconsequential and unpredictable. That's very dangerous in realpolitik. And in the geopolitical juncture that we are now, where we know that the pressures against Trump, not only inside the US, the deep state, the silos in the CIA, in the industrial military complex, in the Pentagon, but also the Atlanticist elites, old money in Europe, the whole Brussels architecture, everybody's against any sort of accommodation between Russia and US. So he has to come up with some sort of victory, Nima. And for the moment, there's nothing in the horizon. So one possibility is something that we're going to see in Vladivostok next week, business. So I'm very, very curious about the business discussions in Vladivostok and what Americans will be in Vladivostok. Maybe if it's not an American delegation, if we have CEOs of high officials from some key American energy companies, this will be a telltale sign that something serious is going on. And it is. We already know, like in Russia, we already know for a few days that Exxon and Rosneft were already talking about Exxon returning to the Sakhalin gas project, which they had to leave because of sanctions, and they lost over $4 billion, which they plan to recoup, obviously. And obviously, Exxon is picking up the phone and calling the White House and saying, look, we want to go back to Russia and do business. This is a language that Trump understands, directly. And obviously, other American companies, okay, maybe we can start selling energy equipment to Russia again, and they need it with so many gas projects everywhere. So, and of course, from the Trumpian point of view, investment in Alaska, which is something that he already mentioned explicitly. So the business opportunities will be there being discussed in Vladivostok. And in Tianjin, during the SCO summit, they'll be discussing the geopolitical ramifications of trying to manage this narcissistic figure completely out of control.
Pepe, what do you make of the meeting between the South Korean president and Donald Trump, in which it was some sort of theater, in my opinion, when he asked Donald Trump, "You're making peace in each and every corner of this planet. Why not in the Korean Peninsula? Why you don't come here and make peace?" It was some. It seems that they've been preparing for this moment to be, presented to all of us.
Yes, because Trump, there's nothing that Trump would like more than to have another meeting with his great friend Kim Jong-un and convince Kim Jong-un to, okay, let's talk to South Korea again. The three of us. And I'll be in the room. Of course, it will be another shot for him. This is the holy grail for Trump, the famous Peace Prize. He's got to have some sort of peace deal struck somewhere, even as he's trying to fabricate new wars. For instance, the Venezuela adventure. This is a prefabrication of a possible war. And obviously, Venezuela it is already being supported and will continue to be supported by both Russia and Iran, and even China as well. So that's the completely illogical framework of an empire on the loose. You cannot, at the same time, seduce the global majority into your vision, because first of all, you don't have a vision, you don't have nothing to sell, prefabricate other forever wars, and dreaming of at least trying to solve wars that you provoked in the first place. The whole circle is completely illogical, but that's the vortex where the whole planet, the North, the global North and the global South are at the same moment. You have the empire exploiting the vassals in the North and continue to intimidate the South. This is the new paradigm, the new logic of an empire on the loose. So, you know, we tried a war against Russia. We lost strategically. We tried a tariff war against China. We lost because China resisted. We tried a hot war against Iran. We lost because Iran is still resisting. We try a tariff war with Brazil. It's not working because Brazil is resisting. So what do? Okay, let's exploit those idiots in Europe. That works. And it's been working swimmingly, right? They got the deal that they wanted. In the whole peacekeeping kabuki, okay, you can send any troops that you want. We have nothing to do with this as long as you buy our weapons, pay in euros, and buy our energy. That's it. So this is the imperial victory for the moment. With the vassals, with the chihuahuas, with the global majority, they are losing one confrontation after another. So India, is there any geoeconomic value or interest in applying 50% tariffs in your major ally in Asia? This is beyond stupid, and still they do it, which proves that, once again, related to your question, there's no clarity and there's no strategy. This is not a strategic administration. The previous one, of course, we all remember the previous one had only one strategy: war on Russia, nothing else. This one has no strategy at all. Or maybe this strategy: okay, we try to intimidate the global South. If it doesn't work, and it's not working with anybody, we exploit the global North. In fact, this you can read that as a strategy, Nima. So 50% of the strategy is actually working.
Pepe, how does Russia feel about the United States again getting involved in some sort of, in my opinion, what Donald Trump is pushing for in terms of peace, if he wants to talk with Kim Jong-un, North Korea? He wants to talk about denuclearization, because what was amazing during the meeting, he said that I want to talk with Russia and China about denuclearization. We are serious about that. And here is what he said. But it seems that the main goal is North Korea, is not the United States or any other party. He's somehow pushing for denuclearization considering North Korea, but I'm not sure if North Korea would be positive, would be any open to talk about. Here is what he said.
Absolutely no question, no way. This was never going to happen. Okay, please play it. Yes.
To do with Russia and with China is denuclearization. And it's very important. One of the things I discussed with President Putin the other day, it wasn't just that, it was also other things. And I think the denuclearization is it's a big aim, but Russia's willing to do it, and I think China's going to be willing to do it too. We can't let nuclear weapons proliferate. We have to stop nuclear weapons. The power is too great.
You know, why am I don't see it a positive sign? Because the same day he's talking about calling the Ministry of Defense the Ministry of War. Why
yes.
How you can put these two pictures together? They contradict each other.
You can't put these two pictures together, Nima. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. It could be the INF treaty. It could be limits on mid-range, short and mid-range missiles, and limit on long-range missiles with nuclear warhead. Or he could be talking, and he doesn't even know he would be talking about it, a completely different nuclear paradigm, especially between the US and Russia. And the Chinese said, no, we're not going to discuss our nuclear arsenal with anybody. Not to mention Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, his the major chips that he has on the table is DPRK's nuclear power. He will never relinquish that. Never. No way. Absolutely not. Especially because he knows that the possibility of a unification of the Koreas is less than zero and will continue to be less than zero. Because for the empire, South Korea is an asset. They won't let South Korea go. So let's say in the next century, if we could arrive at the possibility of a reunification of the Koreas, but still it's a long shot. So Trump makes it sound like what he heard from Putin would be the start of a new nuclear negotiation. No, it's not. Forget it. Not to mention that they simply cannot even touch the toxic subject of Israel's nuclear arsenal. You cannot talk about nuclear non-proliferation if Israel is allowed to have a non-declared nuclear arsenal. And in terms of Iran, everybody with an IQ over 50 knows that Iran does not want a nuclear weapon, as you know very well, Nima. They are being forced to probably get a nuclear weapon in the near future as a deterrent, because they will be attacked again by Israel and the US. Everybody also knows that. So the whole new discussion about nuclear weapons is a non-starter if we have all these taboos still lingering. And the Russians know that very well because they discuss this issue with both China and North Korea, as much as they discuss the non-weaponized nuclear program of Iran with Iran all the time. The Russians know all about it and all the margin of maneuver and why the whole thing is stalling and what the Americans will try to get out of it, some sort of advantage. And especially with a president that he cannot start a process like that because the industrial military complex will be the first to say, no, we're not making any concessions to anybody, starting with the Russians, much less with the Chinese. What do they want, essentially, but they cannot say? They want everybody else to demilitarize in terms of nuclear weapons, but they keep their own arsenal. That's the imperial logic, always, no?
That doesn't make sense because
it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
You're trying to send weapons to Ukraine, fighting this stupid proxy war for more than 3 years, and still sending weapons, intelligence, giving them everything.
Yeah.
But you feel that you can somehow talk about denuclearization. So
exactly, because the intrinsic logic of the empire, even now that it's dwindling, is forever wars. The problem is they don't have the capacity to launch forever wars anymore, especially because everything that they launched in this past few years, they lost all of them ignominiously in many cases. So once again, comes back to the 50% of the non-strategy they have that is actually working. They can make money exploiting the vassals. That's the only thing left. And especially now, after this mix of geoeconomic and tariff war against the leaders of the global south, now they managed to accomplish something that until a few months ago, many of us were saying it's impossible. They united all of the big powers in the global south, especially India, China. China, in terms of their geopolitical victories, it's unbelievable. Like they're raking like one if they go, it's like one a week, non-stop. I'll give another example. They finally got together on the same table, Afghanistan and Pakistan. We know there are lots of problems between the Taliban and Pakistan. Only the Chinese can do that. Why? Because the Chinese convinced the Taliban that now you're going to be part of, okay, we call it the Chinese, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, but you are also going to be part of this economic corridor. It's going to be a China-Pakistan-Afghanistan economic corridor with all the benefits for you. We're going to build hydroelectric plants for you. We're going to build new highways. We are already building the highway crossing the Wakhan Desert. We will help you in all your development projects all over Afghanistan. So this also suits Pakistan because on a key geopolitical border, Pakistan can finally enjoy some stability. Pakistan and Afghanistan have always been very complicated neighbors, as we know. Chinese go there, talk to both sides. Okay, lots of deals here and there. Voila, you got a solution. It's fascinating. And of course, the Russians started this process, I would say, from day one of the Taliban coming back to power. I remember I was following this story on an everyday basis. And the Russian ambassador in Kabul, who understands the Pashtun mentality very, very well, from the beginning he was there, and the Taliban were talking to him, and he said, okay, I'll explain the game to all of you guys. And they trust the Russians. That's immensely important. I'm sure I'm going to see a Taliban delegation in Vladivostok next week. They were in St. Petersburg 2 months ago. So that's it. Russia and China working with Afghanistan. And sooner rather than later, Afghanistan is going to become a full member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They're going to be at the summit in Tianjin this weekend as partners. Soon, they're going to be full members as well. So this is how you do it, Nima. It's long-term diplomacy. It's a lot of work. You have to do the grassroots work. You have to be there. You have to send your best ambassadors and officials and all that. And then you see, springing up a new node in the chessboard. In this case, Afghanistan, Pakistan is immensely important because it also means closer integration with the Central Asian neighbors, with Tajikistan, with Uzbekistan, with Kyrgyzstan, and all that. And that, once again, the Chinese, they are building new railways. They want to integrate Afghanistan into the railway network in that part of Eurasia. Compare that with the non-strategy of the Americans, Dima. We cannot even start now. There's no competition.
The SCO, Pepe, somehow is way ahead of BRICS when it comes to the security, especially when it comes to security.
Yeah.
How do you draw the difference between BRICS and SCO when it comes to the security? And, somehow it feels that SCO is the essence of BRICS, it feels that.
In a sense, it's a very good point, Nima. Because they started a few months before 9. Can you imagine that the SCO, the original Shanghai Five, Russia, China, and 3 Central Asians, their first meeting was in June 2001, 3 months before 9/11. Can you believe this? Most people don't remember that. And at the time, it was a Chinese idea. That's why they were called Shanghai Five. We're going to fight against what the Chinese call the 3 evils. Let me see if I remember correctly. Terrorism, separatism. Well, they're all related to terrorism. And the way they evolved during the 2000s was relatively slow. And then in the 2010s, they started to evolve much faster and little by little changing the configuration. We are not only an anti-terror organization, security organization. We should become also an economic cooperation organization. So this started to happen 2013, 14, 15. I remember very well because I was going to some of their round tables, for instance, in St. Petersburg, and they were starting to discuss business, geoeconomics, and not only security. It was fascinating. You go to a round table like that. Many times I was the only Westerner or the only non-Eurasian. So there were Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, Chinese, Russians, etc. And they were starting to discuss business. These past few years, it's basically business. Most of the time, they discuss deals. They discuss economic investment, economic cooperation, connectivity corridors, and all that. Especially after the Americans were expelled from Afghanistan. Then they started to pick up speed because they saw that, okay, our next step is to integrate Afghanistan inside the SCO, and then we can talk about pan-Eurasian security. Turkey is an observer at the SCO, but that's complicated, Nima, because then you're going to be allowing a sort of fifth column getting inside the organization. And nobody trusts Turkey, at least among the big players. Of course, nobody trusts Turkey, but Turkey tries to influence especially Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, because they have a Turkish economic presence in these three Central Asian nations. But in terms of being a sort of blueprint to how BRICS could consolidate a mutual security platform, BRICS can learn from the SCO. And especially the fact that many of the top BRICS are also SCO members. And that brings us once again to why Lukashenko say that in the end they will merge, these two multilateral organizations will merge, because it makes sense and they're working towards the same goal. The only difference is the SCO is pan-Eurasia, it's Eurasia-wide, and BRICS is transcontinental. Of course, much more ambitious. And of course, the preoccupation of BRICS is geoeconomics. The SCO is getting there. It started as security, but now it's geoeconomics. They will be discussing a lot of deals this weekend in Tianjin. There's no question about that, especially because all the top leaders will be there. It's much easier for them. Okay, let's, that highway that you're going to build, that extend over there, so many possibilities. The connectivity corridors, the international north-south transportation corridor, three BRICS. And these three BRICS will be in Tianjin as SCO members this weekend as well. There you go. The Arctic Silk Road, which will benefit mostly Russia and China, but it could benefit the other ones as well. These new railways integrating Pakistan, Uzbekistan. There's one railway called Pakafuz, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan. It's taking a long time, okay, but it's being built at least. And for the Central Asians, it'll be a huge deal. So it shows us, and it shows the global South at large, that these multilateral organizations, they can be extremely effective. It takes time for them to consolidate and start expanding. But it's the same thing with BRICS. Once BRICS picks up speed, now BRICS is, everybody wants BRICS. And what happened? It happened during these past 2 years. The STO, I think they're reaching the same stage. Maybe the big, takeoff of the SCO will start this weekend.
Pepe, in your article, one of the important points that you're making about this sort of mythical mindset, and you're not, it's not just about Donald Trump. It comes to Europeans as well. And in your opinion, why does Europe persist in framing Putin and Russia through this sort of mythical demonization as the beast at the door, antichrist, and rather than engaging with the historical and civilizational realities of Eurasia? They're not interested in that. They're not talking about that in Europe.
No,
Why is that?
well, first of all, I think that there are two paragraphs, more or less, where I briefly sketch. This is something to be developed later. Why Europe doesn't understand Russia, Eurasia as a whole, Asia as a whole, for that matter, even China. It's a historical process of the peninsula, this western peninsula of Eurasia, Europe, being protected or isolated from wave after wave of nomadic incursions, essentially. So I would say the top two examples are the Mongols and the Turks, the different variations of the Turks leading to the Ottoman Empire. So Europe, if you look at the map, and I try to entice, seduce the readers to try mentally to have a map in their minds, from Danzig in Poland to Trieste in Italy, going through Vienna. If you have this more or less natural barrier, that explains this was more or less the barrier faced by these nomadic incursions. They rarely venture west of this barrier. And in the case of Hungary, it's fascinating because Hungary, in terms of the plains, of the steppes, the famous dictum all across history, if you take a horse in Mongolia, you can gallop all the way to Hungary. And in fact, you can. So Hungary is let's say the semi-steppes in Hungary are an extension of the Central Asian steppes. So this is where these nomadic invasions, usually this is where they stopped. They never, very rarely, in the case of Attila the Hun, for instance, they went further west. And in the case of the Ottomans, they never went further west. They stopped in the Balkans, right? Same with the Mongols. So this is, you can read it in many different ways. It's fascinating. This is one of my favorite reading exercises in different sources for years. You can interpret it as because they did not experience Pax Mongolica, ruled by the Mongols, like the Golden Horde in Russia, or the Ottoman Empire, that's why they are democratic, because they never experienced autocracy. I prefer to read it in a different way. They never learned the best that Pax Mongolica and the Ottoman Empire had to offer. In the case of Pax Mongolica, it was a multicultural empire. Okay, we're not talking about Genghis Khan having his pyramids of skulls and killing a lot of people. No, I'm talking about the inclusiveness of the Mongols, the fact that they adopted Chinese customs, they adopted Buddhism, you name it, everything. They were very sophisticated. They developed sophisticated art, concepts of art. And the Ottomans, they were inclusive. During the Ottoman Empire, everybody could live inside the Ottoman Empire and everybody was respected. So Europe never had that. Europe was always in a sort of, to quote the Brits, splendid isolation on the western part of the peninsula. So they didn't learn much about the Russian. They learned nothing about the Russian experience. They learned, well, they have no bloody clue about Chinese civilization. And they didn't learn anything, the positive aspects of these conquerors, be it Mongols or Turks. So isolated. And obviously that created a superiority complex. And that explains, to a large extent, related to your question, why they look at Russia as inferiors. This is a bunch of Asiatic barbarians. They were conquered by the Mongols for 250 years. What do they have to teach us? This is how the European elites look at Russia. And when we look at the past few centuries, where every century there is a renewed attempt by Europe to go to Russia, dismember Russia, and basically break up Russia. And that's what we are living now. We are living the NATO attempt in the 21st century. The previous one were the Nazis. So the Russians have their historical memory is quite something. They remember everything. They are like elephants. They never forget. And they know that they are the ultimate target for European elites, especially. And in the case of Britain, which is even worse, it's something I allude to in this column. The number one project of British elites is to break up Russia and to always keep Russia inimical to Europe, because they, British elites, still dream of controlling several aspects of Europe or being the most important power in Europe, even though they are not part of Europe. Even though they they voted to get out of Europe only a few years ago. But these people are very, very dangerous. And that's why in the middle, I make a mention of the toxic Medusa in Brussels and her husband. These people come from the British occupied part of Germany. We should never forget that. Never, never, never. So they are essentially British agents. That little pathetic king in France, he's a Rothschild guy. Who are the Rothschilds? They financed all sides of, British kings and queens since the 18th century. So it comes back to the same people, And these people are very, very dangerous, well-connected, powerful, and their Russophobia has no limits. So that explains, I would say, to a great extent, why this forever war against Russia will keep going on. Whatever happens on the battleground, Nima, it doesn't matter if there is peacekeeping, no peacekeeping, DMZ controlled by the Americans, a DMZ with nothing, a no man's land, rump Ukraine, whatever happens. This mentality of the forever war by these, especially British elites and some European elites against Russia, will keep going on. And it's been going on for centuries. It's not going to end in this one.
It's somehow amazing to me, Pepe, that despite having British Empire collapse, and they could somehow manage to insert their sort of mindset in terms of isolation. You've mentioned it's a very important point. The other one is the forever wars that they have in their mind. They somehow, you see that their sort of mindset dominating Europe together with the United States. One of the biggest problems with Washington today is they feel that they're exceptional, nobody else. And Joe Biden said it. You remember that?
Yeah, of course.
And how could they manage that? Somehow dominate the mindset in Washington and in Europe in their favor, or to get somehow that much influence by the British mind?
Well, this is a very, very complicated question. We require at least a book to give you an appropriate answer. Many aspects. Domination of soft power. They're very good at it. Language. Immensely important. They have the real global language. The operating system of the world is the English language. To build that, you need an empire that works. And they had that in the 19th century. Very, very much. And then they had we'll say the subtext, or their poodles, the Americans, they learned from the Brits, who learned from the Roman Empire. So, you go to any of the former great universities in England, the number one branch of study is you have to be proficient in the Roman Empire, much more than the Greeks. Because the Greeks, you can study even the pre-Socratics, you study Plato, you study Aristotle, culture, architecture, etc. But in terms of raw power and how do you exercise raw power, the Holy Grail is to reproduce the Roman Empire, which is what the Brits try to do. And this is what the Americans are still trying to do. So, soft power, good universities, selective study of history, and they are very good at that. Experience of an empire in action. For instance, how they colonized India with just a few officials. Mind-boggling, but they managed. Colonized and exploit and devastated India with only a few imperial officials. Southeast Asia, same thing, especially Burma, Myanmar. So their imperial experience is quite something. And of course, it helps that they had a successful industrial revolution behind them to organize the way the empire works. The exclusivity of the ruling class in Britain. It's a small ruling class, very exclusive. They go to the same country clubs, they study in the same universities, they go to the same clubs in London, they all know each other. And of course, they are linked to global commerce, global trade. And they had time in the imperial times to build this global network of trade, commerce, connections, what the Chinese call guanxi. The Brits are masters of guanxi as well. And if they don't have the connections, they force you to be connected to them. Or in the case of China, for instance, they force the Chinese to submit to them, which is something that the Chinese will never forget, the British Empire. Century of humiliation. And the humiliation started with the Brits. So when you have all these lineaments put together, they managed to organize a system of global exploitation that was very efficient. After they lost the empire, some of this know-how they imparted to the Americans. The Americans copied, the Americans studied, and all that. But the Brits were much more efficient than the Americans. And that explains, for instance, why when you have covert operations by MI6, usually most people don't even know about them, because they are very, very good at covert operations. And the CIA always they're specialists in bungling their own covert operations. You see? So it's a lingering presence that is very, very dangerous. No wonder this, of course, it's redundant and it's obvious, but it applies. Perfidious Albion. It's straight to the point. They're very good at perfidy. Very, very good at it. And dissimulation. And, carrying a stick the size of a planet, but always with a smile, with a beautiful vocabulary, very well enunciated. Monty Python, they were brilliant at mocking the viciousness of the British ruling class through language. And this is something that you only understand if you go to the top private schools in England, and then you go to the top universities the way they used to be, not anymore, right? And which is, I'm going to clobber you to death, but I'll be smiling and speaking with them beautiful words, So they are very good at all that. The French, never. The Spanish, never. The Dutch, never. The Germans, oof, never. Not subtle enough. But the Brits, and this subtlety is essential because you have to dominate, but giving the impression that you're being benign. And this is what, can you imagine? This is what a great deal of the global South got from the Brits. Until one day, Nima, the oppressed wake up. And then it's another story. It took a long time. So the decolonization process after the British Empire took a long time, but at least it happened, especially in India and in Southeast Asia. So the problem is we are still living under this framework. And don't forget the power of the City of London, the trading power of the City of London. So it's going to be very, very hard for Russia to counteract all that. Because these networks, this frame of mind, what the Chinese call the Cold War mentality, in the case of the Brits, it's the 19th century British Raj and British Empire mentality. This is not going to disappear like that. They will keep provoking false flags, color revolutions, fake wars, forever wars, lethal wars, hybrid wars, you name it. And the main target will always be Russia. They still haven't got over the great game competition in the 19th century. And in fact, they invented what we do, geopolitics. The Brits invented geopolitics. Why? Because they needed to rationalize their domination. So when Mackinder was talking about the heartland, basically he was saying, look, if we don't do what we need to do, we won't control the heartland anymore. And that's where we are now. Because the Americans are losing control of their heartland, and there's nothing they can do to have it back. So you can imagine this in the mindset of those people who studied in Yale, or some of the former very good Ivy League schools in the US, which formed the American elites. It's not their world anymore. They are losing it very, very fast. So that explains why they are beyond desperate. And with a Narcissus in power or without him, it's the same thing. So there's not much difference between the former pathetic cadaver in the White House and Narcissus. The intrinsic logic of the empire remains the same, which is we cannot allow ourselves to become a second-rate power and lose our empire. And this is exactly what's happening. And they don't have a plan B, Nima.
But I think Europe needs a backup plan, a plan B. Oof. And what would that be? Can the former Austro-Hungarian states and Serbia realistic form a counter coalition to resist NATO's forever wars strategy?
Well, I wrote that. It's a little bit of wishful thinking, Nima, and all of you, our audience, I confess. But basically, I put that in the column because this is the only serious counterpower inside Europe against this logic. It's nations that were member of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and of course, Serbia, which is in a very complicated position, but that still they resist. It's the only counterpower. When you look at France, Germany, Italy, come on, it's an absolute disaster. And when you look at the way NATO and the EU is controlled by those Baltic chihuahuas and Poland and Finland now, it's even worse. It's beyond pathetic. But this is realpolitik. These are the people who they open their mouths in Europe, and everybody's, oh, the president of Finland, oh, the prime minister of Poland, oh, that stupid idiot in Latvia, and everybody, oh. And you have, worse than everything, the batshit crazy Estonian chick as head of foreign policy of Europe. So you don't need anything else, You just splash this over there. And the Martians arrive on Earth and say, who are these people? No wonder they're crazy. Let's get out of here. We don't want anything to do with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Before wrapping up, the last topic would be Pepe, what's going on in Gaza and how the Trump administration. You mentioned this in your article, and the Trump's normalization of extreme violence.
Yes.
Yeah. What's that all about?
It's even more frightening than we thought it would be, because you have a guy who actually says, I can do anything I want because I am the president of the United States. His own quote. Normalizing a genocide that over 90% of the planet can see by themselves every day on their phones that it is a genocide. How do we escape that? We can't be, and we become accomplices, because not even very serious government are doing anything to prevent this genocide. And worse than that, the Arab world, this is an Arab problem. This is Jews killing Arabs, exterminating Arabs, famine provoked by Jews against Arabs. History one day will be unforgiven. This may take a long time. Do you see any Arab government doing anything to stop the genocide? I rest my case. Who is trying to do something? It's not a government. It's in fact, we can characterize them as a tribal militia, which now is empowered as a government. The Houthis in Yemen. They're not Sunnis. They're Zaidi Shiites. Hezbollah, same thing. It's a mix of communitarian and military movement with a very strong social approach. Shiites. And the Islamic Republic of Iran. Shiites. These are the top three who are trying to do something to stop the genocide in Gaza with practical actions. Look at the Arab world as a whole. Nothing. Absolutely not. So this will be for eternal shame of these Arab political leadership everywhere. They don't even qualify as chihuahuas. You know, they are infra specimens. They should be ashamed forever for what they are not doing. I'm not talking about the Arab street or Arab public opinion. That's a completely different story. We're talking about the political leadership, Egypt, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, you name it. And history will judge it as beyond shameful. The problem is, in realpolitik terms and in practical terms, nothing is being done. And if you have the United States actually normalizing and supporting the genocide, that's it. These are the lines that demarcating realpolitik. And obviously, if you talk about this in Russia, which is an extremely touchy subject, the Russians say, yes, but we have our own war here in our western borders. This is not our war. It's their war, meaning our Arab friends. The Chinese, the same thing. Yes, we can support diplomatic, but it's not a Chinese war. We have our own problems here with our borders as well. So it's disheartening. It's immensely depressing. It leaves us all in a limbo of impotence. Very, very sad. And there's nothing any of us or anybody around the world can do. Something could be done if the Jupiter, Narcissus, Subtheseus, Circus Ringmaster picks up the phone and tells the desk out over there, stop now. That would be the only way. And we know it's not going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody, even Russia and China,
no,
they're not. the only country that is capable of doing this is the United States.
Exactly. So it's I'm very sorry that we end on such a depressing note, but we talk about realpolitik, no?
Exactly.
And this is realpolitik, and we have to deal with it. And we have to deal with our impotence, and we have to deal with our helplessness and with our anger. All of us everywhere. There's nothing to be done to prevent an extermination live in front of all of us.
Yeah, exactly. Muito obrigado, Pepe.
Thank you so much. The Donetsk mug says, Nima! I want Nima!
Muito obrigado, Pepe.
Okay, so I'm hitting the road next week. I don't know, Nima. It's going to be very hard. So, but if I have a break sometime in Vladivostok, we talk next week. Okay?
Yeah.
Next week is a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah.
SCO, the parade in Tiananmen, and Vladivostok. Wow. And this is and on Friday we have Putin live. Wow.
Yeah. Até mais.
Até mais. Obrigado. Abração. E abração a vocês todos, a audiência. Vocês que entendem português na audiência, abração a vocês todos.
And goodbye to everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.